Whoa, let's learn stuff.
Let's learn about pricing strategy.
So, chapter 10, the title of the chapter is Price. What is the value proposition worth? So, this goes along with other stuff that you've written about, other things we've covered or learned. So, last week, for example, we covered the whole concept of product. So, there's Let me get to that. Sorry about all the scrolling. There's the core product, actual product, augmented product, product mix. And then we got into the whole thing of, okay, what exactly is the product? So we talked about Athens State University as a product and the different components of that. So in the end, that's why many marketers prefer to use the term offering. So because when we sell a product or service to a consumer, they're getting so much more than the actual product. So whether it's a car or an education at Athens State, you get a lot of other things with that. And so now that you have an idea of the product or service that you offer, the solutions that you offer to your customers, it's time to think about how much is it going to cost? Like what, as it put here, what is the value proposition worth? Like this added value that you're wanting your customers to buy into, how much do you think you should price that? Because if you think about your experiences as a consumer, that the price of something, that's a pretty big factor whether you would ultimately purchase something, right? Depending on what it is. Especially if you have many other choices, like my go-to example, like restaurants, right? The price of one restaurant versus another, that could very well determine what you're gonna do that Friday night when you want to go eat out somewhere or sometime during the weekend. So that's what this whole chapter is about. And I recently reread chapter 10 just to kind of reacquaint myself with that. It's been a while since I read chapter 10, and that's why I put this right here. So the things I want to talk about tonight, a few items, they're concepts that are taken from the chapter, a lot of them, but the way I present it is not quite in the same order as the textbook. Uh, just That's just kind of how it worked out. And then I also didn't draw everything out of the textbook, and really that's been the case, right? For all the different chapters that I've talked about. Also, I've just kind of taken parts and expanded on that. For this one, it's the same thing. So I just took concepts from chapter 10, but I didn't take everything from chapter 10. Like, I'm not going to talk about everything tonight. And so there's this note here to read chapter 10, to learn more about the items not covered. And the other part to that is I've noticed after looking at a couple of different textbooks that sometimes they don't even talk about some of the things that I listed here, and maybe they even use different terms. So it's kind of interesting, but in the end, this is what I wanted to focus on tonight. So first thing, or not besides, but because pricing is so important to the consumer, well, it makes sense that because that drives whether somebody will buy something or not, well, of course, that's going to impact revenue and profitability. Because that's like say Athens State University, right? Like if no students want to attend the university, well, then that means nobody's paying any kind of tuition or anything like that. So of course, that's going to affect whether the university can stick around or not. One example that I was thinking about as far as just really the kind of things also that communicate a price, like what price communicates, is Five Below. So Five Below, I was thinking of Five Below because that's just something new for Athens, the Athens area in the last few months. Like there's this new store that opened. I know there's a Five Below in Huntsville somewhere, but um, Five Below, we'll just use what Wikipedia says. So Five Below is an American chain of specialty discount stores. So yeah, it's kind of like that concept, right? Dollar General, dollar store. Five Below, the name is signifies that items are $5 or below, which, as some of you have learned in the last whatever um, couple of years, is that's not the case anymore, right? There are other things on there that are not $5 anymore, and that's this right here. Five, they call it Five Beyond, right? So it's kind of interesting, and I wanted to use this as an example because with Five Below, what they want is for consumers to feel like the items are affordable and accessible, right? Because you're thinking $5, no big deal. So you go in there and yeah, they got a lot of cool looking stuff if you're into just kind of hunting for uh and here's the words I used here: trendy, fun, inexpensive, right? And you don't always mean to spend a lot of money, but when you go in there, like, oh, I just gotta have this decoration or this, what, like I last time I was there, I bought some kind of footstool because why not? It's $5, right? So stuff like that. So you always end up buying more than you intended to, and that's by design. And when Five Below started introducing items, so they have Five Beyond, so things that are over $5, there was skepticism from people, that like, how can that be even feasible for a company that calls themselves Five Below? And this kind of goes along with a concept that I talked about earlier this semester about doing your homework as a marketer and knowing your audience, right? Because many fails happen when we don't think about our target audience. And if we start going away from our mission, then some people might wonder, well, what's up with that? So one example that comes to mind that I talked about earlier in the semester was Colgate, right? So the toothpaste company, they came up with some kind of frozen dinner line, so pasta. So can you imagine going to the store today and seeing Colgate um, pasta or Colgate, what was that? Lasagna, right? Frozen lasagna. Well, to me, I think of, well, is it going to taste like toothpaste? So I really doesn't make sense. So for Five Below, yeah, there were concerns about like, how is that going to work with the company and their branding? But in the end, Five Beyond, or not Five Beyond, Five Below's marketing people were able to spin it as it's an expansion of their offering. Instead of, they're not replacing the Five Below model, $5 or below. They're still very much a discount store, but they're expanding their selection. So if you've been there recently, you'll find that they have, things that are priced higher, but maybe some things might be, it could be the things that people are looking for that they might otherwise not have found to be something they might want to purchase, like, say, headphones, for example, right? So instead of $5 headphones, I guess they have what, $10 headphones, but maybe, in the end, some people think that might signify better quality. I don't know. But my point there is that with pricing, they very much communicate this whole idea of affordability and accessibility. Everybody can afford what they have to offer. And so if you're going to veer away from that or want to do something else, you want to make sure that it makes sense for your brand. I remember, let's see, McDonald's, they had like, when you go to a few years ago at McDonald's, they had like a huge dollar menu, right? But now, is there even a dollar menu at this point? No. Okay, but it's definitely not like it was, right? You could buy a whole bunch of stuff before for $1 each, but now that's not the case. And that makes sense because that leads me to this next related point. When it comes to pricing decisions, how much an organization wants to charge for what they're selling, there's going to be a lot of factors affecting it. And one of the more obvious ones, especially since that's a big topic and something we're living through, is the economic conditions, right? Like inflation, for example. So things just cost more, and those costs get passed on to the consumers. There's other external factors too, right? There might be more competition, so it depends on the competitive landscape. So that kind of should ring a bell, right? Because that's one of the things that you all should have talked about in your assignment 4 section, something to think about, because you don't exist in a bubble. There's going to be people who will offer the same kind of solution, similar solution to whatever it is you're trying to sell. And so, yeah, you need to keep your competition in mind. Then there's also the whole idea of demand and then regulatory consideration. So demand, that's if you all have taken economics, right, you will have learned about supply and demand, and there's a elastic demand or inelastic demand. So one way that my econ professor explained it is uh so if you look at here, let me pull up supply and demand chart. So supply and demand chart looks something like this. You got quantity on the x-axis, price on the y-axis, and you kind of find where it intersects, and that's your equilibrium right there. So the slope of your demand, the steeper it is, so the more that it's like, because the letter I, right, is vertical. So the steeper it is, the more inelastic the demand is, meaning no matter how much the price changes, the demand for it is not going to change much. And those would be for things that are necessities. So for example, even though food, certain, staples are more expensive, well, we're not well, maybe food's not the best example. Medicine. If you need to take some kind of medicine, ultimately it's not going to matter how much the price is. You're still going to need to consume the same amount every month, regardless of what the price is. But if something is elastic, the demand for it, so if a price goes up, like so, then the demand's going to decrease for that because the demand is elastic. Like people could live without it if the price goes up too high. So those would be things like I guess those are also relative depending on your budget, right? But for many people, maybe they won't eat out as much because their budget, they just don't have room for that anymore if things are more expensive that way.